The ideas expressed in City Club forums are those of the speakers and not of the City Club of Cleveland, IdeaStream Public Media, or their sponsors. Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
There you go. No.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where we are devoted to conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. It's Friday, August 22nd, and I'm Reverend Artis Arnold, youth minister at Bethany Baptist Church, located in the historic Glenville community, and also vice president of the City Club Board of Directors. It's my utmost honor to introduce today's guest and dear alpha brother, Bishop William J. Barber II. You may all recall the time Martin Luther King Jr. famously stated, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." In our country's fight towards this justice, there are few like Reverend Barber. For decades, Reverend Barber has served as a powerful voice in movements that combine faith, morality, and activism. He is the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, which is a new movement that aims to address the same issues that Martin Luther King Jr. spoke against in the original 1960s campaign. Reverend Barber served as senior pastor of Greenleaf Christian Church Disciples of Christ for 30 years and as president of the North Carolina NAACP from 2006 to 2017 and on the National NAACP Board of Directors from 2008 to 2020. Reverend Barber is also president and senior lecturer of the Repairers of the Breach and the professor in the practice of public theology and public policy, and founding director of the Center for Public Theology and Public Policy at Yale Divinity School. The Reverend's accolades and titles are numerous, and on top of all of it, he is the author of 5 books. His most recent book, White Poverty: How Exposing Myths About Race and Class Can Reconstruct American Democracy. It presents a new call for solidarity among a divided people. He offers guidance that has never been more necessary, particularly in a moment right now, when the strength of our democracy in our nation is being tested. We will hear how we can build social justice movements that uplift both our deepest moral and constitutional values. Moderating this conversation is Pastor Larry L. Macon Jr. He is pastor, author, and executive motivational speaker and recording artist. He serves as senior pastor at the Bishop of Mount Zion Oakwood Village, one of the largest churches in the greater Cleveland area with more than 6,000 members. A recognized leader in education and public service, Bishop Macon is on the board of trustees, member at Kent State University, a former vice chairman of the board at Central State University and HBC here in Ohio, and currently serves on the Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiative Board for the state of Ohio, appointed under the governor's leadership. He is also author of the 4 books, a former co-host of NBC affiliates WKYC's Live on Lakeside. A reminder for our live stream audience: if you have a question during the Q&A portion of the forum, you can text it to 330-541-5794. And the City Club staff will try to get it into our program. Now, members, friends in the City Club of Cleveland, please join me in welcoming Reverend William Barber and Pastor Larry Macon Jr. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me get this. Making sure the mic is on. Good, good. First of all, you are too kind. I want you all to know I am not late because I'm from the South. I'm late because I'm from the South and we don't take disrespect. And the driver disrespected me and I wouldn't ride with him. And he looked like me. So it ain't all about black and white. I also came in, I want to say this, I'll say this to everywhere I go. I'm an advocate for disability. And when you bring a speaker in, try to always have a disability. Make sure there's a bathroom close, that they don't have to walk for it, especially since we claim to be liberal. You know, that's why I said that it's got to be more than words. You can talk a lot, but your tree is known by the fruit it bears. And so I would rather ride with a Hispanic brother that's just trying to make it, who's being chased by ICE, than a Negro that will disrespect me. And that's what I did. And that's why my wife loves me, because she knows I don't play when it comes to protecting her dignity and mine as well. So I want to say that to the audience, so somebody say, he thinks he's privileged, he's late. No, that's not what happened. The other thing I want to mention, is there a pastor out there that pastors a small church among the poor that works hard? Is there somebody who's white? Wait a minute, I'm looking diversity. Is there somebody white? A smaller church, white church, where? Sean, come on up here. I want you to sit with me. Come on up here. Come on. Come on. Because two reasons. I've tried to honor all people. I don't do any one, like, this would be the wrong conversation, just have two black men up here talking in the country we're in right now. We need the diversity. Come on up. Come on, take my seat, Doc. And secondly, hey, Doc. Hey, bro. That's all right. And then look at the audience, right? Look at the audience, right? Look at the audience. And the second reason is because fusion politics is going to get us out of this. Staying in our silos is not going to get us out of this. And unlike this pastor who's an activist, if you go back in history, in the Montgomery movement, it wasn't the great big churches that made a difference. Montgomery was a little small church. You know, it was small. And so what we have to do, Jesus had 12. You know, he had a large church, then he lost them all when he had to make sacrifices that was going to contradict Herod. You really don't know who's with you until you find yourself in controversy. So I wanted to model. I couldn't stand up here and model just that. So I wanted to model. If I had two more chairs, I'd have a black woman up here, I'd have a Latino up here. In fact, if y'all find them, y'all can come on. I'd have a white woman up here. I mean, I'm just as serious. See, that day is over for having somebody stand behind the podium like they got all the answers. And some folk getting invitations and some folk never get an invitation. And the ones that never get an invitation oftentimes do more work than the ones that do. Yeah. So where that sister that y'all said work with the poor and where was she over here? Y'all were hollering at somebody. Come on up here. And where's the white sister, a Latino? Where is? Brother, help her get a chair. Bring a chair. There's a Latino, there's got to be a Latino pastor or worker in here somewhere. If not, go get somebody. And the reason I say go get them is because we cannot let people exist in fear. We need to make sure and we need to do it to the point that we say, ICE, if you want to come in here, and you're going to have to take all of us, but you're not messing with our folk by ourselves no more. We're not leaving nobody out. Baby, you want to come? Okay, all right. I want to do some broad strokes and then have this conversation with our dear friend and brother and leader in this community. I thank God for all that he has done and continues to do in his family, his legacy. in this community. And I want to just maybe entitle this to the City Club of Cleveland, but to the cities and communities, hamlets and villages and towns throughout the nation. As long as we claim to have a government of the people and by the people and for the people, then we, the people, have a responsibility to guard this nation. To recognize that even in its ideals, they were flawed, but they were written on paper. And our job is to turn flawed words into realized dreams. Know what I mean? I'll tell you what I mean by flawed in a minute. And we would rise, Heather, to begin to remember what is supposed to bind us. I'm not talking about what does. I'm not talking about, I know we're broken. We've been broken for a long time. From the beginning, we didn't even let women vote. We didn't let poor white men vote. We were a nation too timid to put slavery in the Constitution, but we put the slave methodology in the Constitution by calling people 3/5 of a person. So from the beginning, I understand that, right? But even in the midst of that, our ancient traditions teach us that love, justice, and mercy are supposed to be our guiding light. When John Winthrop preached that sermon of City on the Hill, he meant one thing. Now, it got messed up almost immediately because mercy was turned to meanness toward the native people and justice was turned to injustice. But he at least said it, quoting Jesus, that nobody puts a light under a bushel. But we're supposed to be a city set up on a hill. And the basis of that city, as my wife has been preaching, is supposed to be poor in spirit and people who are meek and poor in spirit and those who mourn. In other words, have a deep capacity, Howard Thurman said, to care for others, which moves you into action. We're supposed to be peacemakers, not peace breakers. And we're supposed to care for the least of these. And we are supposed to be a people who rejoice when we are persecuted for love, for mercy, for being meek, for being poor in spirit, for hungering and thirsting after righteousness. And our religious tradition tells us that's what's supposed to bind us. Back in the Old Testament, one of the great prophets, and you know there are 2,000 scriptures in the Bible that tell us what we're supposed to do in relationship to women, children, the poor, and the least of these from a corporate perspective, not just individual charity, but from a societal perspective. And if you know those 2,000 scriptures and you know if you cut all of them out, the Bible would fall apart. Which is why the slaves used to say, everybody talking about heaven ain't going there because they knew. But it's also why religious nationalism is heresy. And you should never call it Christian nationalism because that's not Christian. It's not what ought to be binding us. But the scripture I'm getting ready to read also tells you why any church that's just praising God but not performing justice is just having a party. and having an idolatrous party too, particularly if they worship the pastor more than they worship Jesus. And if the pastor is making sure they give money to his pastor's appreciation, but he's not in the street fighting for living wages, then what's really the point? Amen, lights. Let me have that napkin again. But so Isaiah said, one of those 2,000 scriptures, I got it. Woe unto those, listen, who legislate evil. Yeah. That's not me, that's not pastor, that's the scripture. Woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights and make women and children pray, P-R-E-Y, which is why I agreed with our Speaker of the House when he quoted something that we've been saying for about 10 years now, that when you open a county commissioner's a meeting, a city council meeting, a state assembly meeting, a governor's meeting, a Congress meeting, a senator's meeting, and you pray, P-R-A-Y, but then pass policies that pray, P-R-E-Y, on the very people we're supposed to be concerned about, you should have kept the prayer to yourself. But legislating justice is what's supposed to hold us together. Jesus declared that not for individuals, but nations. He said, and the nations, and the king would say to the nation, the Lord would say to the nations, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was in prison, did you visit me? When I was sick, did you care for me? When I was an immigrant, did you welcome me? Once again, America is at one of its most possible places of judgment right now. Because Jesus said, inasmuch as you do unto the least of these, you do it unto me, right? And that's what's supposed to bind us together. It amazes me how all these political figures want to put their hands on Bibles and don't even know what's in it. And if they do, it doesn't seem like they care much, many of them. But not only our moral religious tradition, what Abraham Lincoln called our ancient faith is supposed to bind us, the better angels, if you will. But also what's supposed to bind us is the commitment of our founding documents. This is a time, Pastor, that we ought to be picking up our founding documents, the newspaper and the Bible in our hands and preaching from them and teaching from them. Now, I know they were flawed men that wrote them. You know that from the fact that they said inalienable right that all men, you know right there it was flawed. Right? But sometimes I look at those documents and say, you know, my grandfather's Pentecostal, maybe it wasn't them writing. Maybe they just held a quill. Maybe it was the Holy Spirit writing. Because why would you write a document that indicts yourself? Why would you write a document that is a document that forces metanoia or repentance yourself? Why would you write a document that then can be amended if you didn't know it was wrong? Because maybe the truth of the matter is we all struggle with doing right. And maybe the truth of the matter is even those that knew that it was wrong, as one writer said, the sin of slavery was like a serpent that sat up under the meeting table, and every time they even got close to dealing with the issue, the serpent would bite and poison the whole conversation. And yet, despite the poison, we need to lift up at least what the ideas were supposed to be. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And my grandmama used to say, when you say something is self-evident, what you're saying is somebody's stupid if they don't get this. Turn to your neighbor and say, don't be stupid. You know, I mean, it's stupid to be a racist. It's stupid to say that somebody's an illegal alien when the country they're coming to is the country they once owned. It's stupid. Now, you don't tell somebody they aren't welcome here when Texas was theirs, California was theirs, Arizona was there, New York was there, Louisiana was there. Come on. Some things are just self-evident. In fact, last time I checked, the earth is the Lord's. And in the Declaration of Independence, it also says that when any government begins to, when there's been a long train of abuses, now we know we're going to get it wrong sometime, but when there's a consistent, long train, just constant, it says it is the duty and the right, the duty and the right of the people to throw off that form of government. And that wasn't supposed to be applicable to just the folk who came here from England. That was written down and etched in parchment and stone forever. We ought to be lifting that up and saying, hey, well, I'm going to talk about that because Trump is not the problem alone. Let me put a pin there, I'll come back to you. See, when you have pneumonia, When you have pneumonia, the snot is not the problem, it's the symptom. Don't mess with me. See, part of the problem is even some liberals and Democrats, you want to be Trump, but you didn't do what you were supposed to do when you had power. And you got to own it all. I'm not saying he's not a problem. I'm just saying it's something deeper there. Oh, I got to come back to that. But anyway, Constitution. The Constitution is supposed to bind we the people in order to form a more perfect union. Right there is confession. We are not perfect. We know we're flawed. But we ought to lift that up because until this nation can repent, it can't get better. It will continue to the brother said that I was the founder of the New Poor People's Campaign. Well, not really. And he said Martin Luther King, not really. It was the women that called for the Poor People's Campaign. They called Dr. King into it. But it was the women like Mary Wright Edelman who was down in Mississippi, right? They're the ones. And Dr. King came, embraced it, but he wasn't the beginning. And the sadness is that there are 140 million poor and low-wage people in this country more than almost 60 years after the Poor People's Campaign. Now, you listen to some folks, they'll tell you it's 30 million, but the actual number is 140 million. The majority are white, 66 million in raw numbers. The majority in percentage are black, because 60.1% of black people are poor and low wage. And some of them can't even go to our civil rights organization banquets because we price them out of the range of our own people. "51% of our children are poor and low wage. 43% of all adults are poor and low wage, and the wealthiest nation in the country." So in a sense, we didn't start something new. It got, the movement was shot. The movement was killed. He was leading us in a second Reconstruction. The first Reconstruction was lynched and murdered and killed and politicized out. The second Reconstruction was murdered and killed and politicized out. It never finished. So what we're simply doing is picking up what ought to be the third Reconstruction in the face that because we didn't finish the first two, we still have the problems reciprocally. But we the people to establish justice, to provide for common defense, ensure domestic tranquility, promote the general welfare. These are the words that should be what we place on top of every piece of legislation and says, does it lead up to this? Does it match this? Not is it Republican, not is it Democrat, not is it white, not is it black, not is it liberal. Who told you were liberal? Who told you were conservative? Who told you were on the left? And then you try to tell everybody the folk on the right are wrong, but then you call them right, and then you say, that's confusing language. Where'd you get that language from? Why put yourself through linguistic contortions rather than just speaking what you're saying? You're wrong. You're wrong. That's wrong. That's not right. That's unjust. All these little labels. But forget all of that. Does it ensure domestic tranquility? Does it provide for the common defense? Does it promote the general welfare? Why did we let welfare? Your governor was one of them, the former governor that took it out. He was the one that when he was in Congress, he pushed, ending welfare. What was his name? Why y'all scared to say the man's name? Kasich. I'll say it if you won't say it. Yeah. He was the one that pushed the end welfare, pushed it out. But why you push welfare out of a political conversation when you swear to uphold the general welfare? Ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense. Right? These are words that set a high standard. And the truth is, when we look at where we are today, when we look at the reality of our present condition, we have to admit we are engaged in a pretty dark and low-down vision that is beneath even the flawed vision of the past. Look at where we are, the crisis of poverty. 800 people are dying a day from poverty. I didn't say 800 since the tariff, 800 since Trump. It's been going on a long time. 800 people dying every day from poverty. It would take you 2 years of funerals every day to go to the number of people that would die from poverty today in the richest nation in the world. 250,000 people a year. Even before this latest bill, 87 million people were underinsured or underinsured. Or underinsured. The crisis, somebody say the crisis of poverty. And then the crisis of systemic racism. Not just toward black folk, but the crisis of systemic racism. Not somebody calling you the N-word, but somebody smiling while they take your voting rights. Smiling while they steal land from the Apache Nation in Arizona that Trump is trying to engage in now, but he didn't start it, but he's trying to defend it. The racism toward our native brothers and sisters, racism toward indigenous brothers and sisters, even the racism that comes toward the collateral damage that racism causes for white people. Because see, voter suppression may target black folk, but it doesn't just hurt black folk. Voter suppression right now is impacting 50 million voters. And that's the laws they got on the books, not the laws that they're going to put on the book. Where are we now? We're dealing with the continuation of the Southern strategy. I won't go through it all, but the Southern strategy, when Martin was shot, and I think the reason Martin was shot and killed was what he said in '65 at the end of the Selma to Montgomery March. When he stood on the steps of the Alabama State House and he said that every time there's the possibility to build a beloved community, he said the oligarchs feed people the stale bread of racism when their policies will not fill their empty stomachs. And he said every time there is the possibility for the masses of Negroes and the masses of poor white people to come together and form a voting bloc that can fundamentally shift the economic architecture of the nation, then the oligarchs sow division. So one of the premises of the Southern strategy, that is, how can we control the 13 former Confederate states? Because as long as we control those states, we control 170 electoral college votes, we control 26 senators, we control 31% of the House without a vote being cast. We control the governors. How do we do that? They said, and it's in a book called The Time of Illusion, and it says we have to intentionally sow division. They said we have to sow division. They called it a positive division. And then they said, and it might get out of hand. If we sow enough division, it might produce a political Frankenstein we can't control. So when that political Frankenstein comes on the scene, we'll just lie and say we didn't do it. That's written, y'all. That's not something that came from me. So the Southern strategy, how can you take 13 states, or what we call the South and the Southwest, maybe 15 states, and control the entire nation, and force people to even stop fighting for those nations, and then you use a little of that in Ohio and a little of that because they found out that Southern strategy stuff, if you mix it right, it'll even work in the industrial areas of the country. It'll work in some places in New York. It'll work. Here we are. We are in a time the Democratic Party gave up on the so-called red counties. It's one of the reasons we're in this mess right now. You have one political party just walked away from the South, walked away from Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas. Even though the numbers tell us that just a little effort and a little organizing and a little policy that makes sense. Because 1/3 of all poor people live in the South, 1/3 of all poor white people live in the South. And then we're dealing with a Republican Party that has capitulated to so-called populism and created this thing called MAGA, which is not the populism of the first Reconstruction. It's not a populism that's about justice. And then we're dealing with this, don't y'all ever say the beautiful bill. Don't repeat. It's the big, ugly, deadly, destructive bill. That the University of Penn and the Yale University did a study. If nothing else about that bill, there's several things you need to know. 51,000 people will die every year, starting from its passage. 51,000 people. That forces pastors like me and him to have to make a choice, and my wife was a pastor. If somebody in our congregation dies from the lack of health care, are we going to stand over them and lie and say God called them home? Or are we going to say God will welcome them home, but the government killed them? And this big, ugly, deadly bill, it gives $150 million to the people hiring ICE agents, and now they're using Isaiah 6 to recruit ICE agents. They're going among young white folk and saying, who will go and who will go for me? Who shall I send? That's their recruiting language. And they're doing it in mass, and they're doing it in mass, and some black folk are saying, oh, that ain't our issue. Don't you know the only people that used mass before were the KKK and the Gestapo? And then 20-some million people are going to lose SNAP. 17 million people, health care. That's where we are. Betrayal of promises to feed hungry. Many of the people losing their health care will also be veterans. Our military budget now is over $1 trillion. If you cut the military budget in half today, you'd still have more money in our military budget than Russia, North Korea, Japan, and Iran and Iraq combined. And on the other hand, if you took 10% of that budget and put it toward programs you ran, you could abolish slavery, abolish poverty, and abolish the lack of health care. And the sad thing about it, where are we? We're not having that conversation in our political realm. You can think about it. Every political presidential year, we have debates. 140 million people living in poverty, 43% of the nation, 51% of the children, and no presidential candidate ever has to answer the question, what are you going to do about poverty? What are you going to do about low wages? And all of the media is now controlled by the oligarchs that lean into this extremism. We've got attacks on science. Whoever thought we'd attack on science, attack on vaccines? Now folk want open attempt. We got open attempts. One thing to rig an election, but it's another to do it openly. You know, to say, I'm going to mess with you, and then I'm not even going to allow you to judge me. I'm not even going to allow you to have a report card. And then, but there's a sign that all of you all get in this room. You ought to know we got to figure out what binds us and how to organize. They are attacking Oscar on PBS. Oscar is an enemy. Kermit is an enemy. What's his other name? Big Bird is an enemy. What's the other one name? The Mr. Snuffleupagus is an enemy. The Count, a 1, a 2 is an enemy. What's the other little one? The little one, the bluish purple one. Elmo is a puppy who? All right. Cookie Monster is an enemy. Mana is an enemy. Bop Beady Beady is an enemy. And while we laugh, inside of that is something terrifying. Because in the world of authoritarianism and neo-fascism, yes, the Count is an enemy because the Count on Sesame Street teaches you that people have taught you to fear what doesn't need to be feared. And that everything that bumps in the dark and is different is not your enemy. And attacking Oscar Oscar is trying to teach us that even somebody in a garbage can have witness. Even somebody living on the street. Even somebody living on the street can have wisdom. And they don't need to have their tents folded up and them run out of D.C. or run out of Cleveland. What we ought to be doing is listening to them. What their reality says about the need for housing and health care and justice for all people. Because millions are either homeless, on the verge of homeless, but when you're an authoritarian, you want to destroy anything, especially the arts, that causes you to have a different kind of moral imagination. Here we are, we're seeing the undermining of global alliances, the attack on sciences, and these things are far below the call of love, justice, and mercy in the scriptures, far below the government of the people, by the people, far below ensuring domestic tranquility and establishing justice, far below what even Franklin Delano Roosevelt said in 1932 that could be applied today. Listen, a man in a wheelchair, a man who would have had difficulty getting in here, a man who couldn't have come up on this stage, he'd had to speak from down there. But he guided our nation. Listen what he said in 1932. As he was informed by his labor secretary, who was a product of the social gospel movement. The social gospel movement that before Dr. King and before talked about WWJD, what would Jesus do, but not in the way it was misused by so-called Christian nationalism, religious nationalism, but they looked at children walking around with their fingers cut off and said, what would Jesus do? People dying because they had no air ventilation. In fact, is what would Jesus do? And Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, in these days of difficulty, we Americans everywhere must and shall choose the path of social justice, the path of faith. I see 1/3 of a nation ill-housed, ill-clad, ill-nourished. The test, this is 1939, the test of our progress is not whether we add more abundance to those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. The vision we see is far below what Martin Luther King articulated on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, this dream over against the nightmares of interposition and nullification. It is far beneath when Dr. King warned America just before he was murdered. It seems this morning as though I can hear God speaking through the universe saying, be still, America, and know that I am God. And if you don't stop, and he was referring to militarism and poverty and racism, if you don't stop, if you don't straighten up, if you don't stop exploiting people, I'm going to use my power to break the backbone of your power. This dark vision that we see. And it demands now that we embrace something in one of our hymns, national hymns. America, America, God, men die in every flaw. So how do we deal with this darkness? How do we deal with the work of mending? The first thing is we got to understand what authoritarianism is that the Republican Party and this MAGA group has grabbed onto. I was recently talking to Ruth Ben-Gayat. You need to get her book on authoritarianism, who has studied it. And she talks about the role of authoritarianism first is to get people to deregulate their morality. Is to throw away things that we just own as true, whether you're an atheist or a person of faith. Just some stuff are just right and some things are just wrong. And then he goes on, and authoritarian, authoritarian regimes prioritize the preservation of power and control above all else. They restrict freedom of the press. They manipulate the media. Authoritarianism regimes suppress opposition through censorship, surveillance. They concentrate power in the hands of a single leader or a small group. Authoritarianism often involves limitations on freedom of speech and assembly. Fascism elevates a charismatic dictator as the embodiment of the nation so that that leader is followed not because of the policies he passes, but because of the action he engages in. It's not even about whether he passes policy. It's about people living out their meanness vicariously through his meanness. Number two, fascist regimes promote intense nationalism and emphasize military strength and expansionism. Fascism relies on violence and intimidation to silence dissent. descent. Fascist regimes attempt to control all aspects of the society, especially culture, education, and the economy, and make it their ideology. Fascism often identifies external or internal enemies that are a threat to the nation that point people there so you don't see how they are robbing and stealing from you. And what we have now is not authoritarianism or fascism, but a lethal mixture of both. A lethal, and it's not new. It's not new in America. No, it's not new. Democrats are right to use their power to push back, but it's not new. People of faith, whether you're in the party, right? It's not new. Authoritarianism, this way of thinking, and fascism was at the backdrop of slavery and racism. Hitler said he learned some of his tactics from the Jim Crow right here in America. And so here we see it. We see the thing about this current conversation about redistricting. First of all, this is not a new conversation. Redistricting started in Boston when they wanted to district out the Irish people and the Polish people. Started in the North, didn't start in the South. Secondly, this desperation of gerrymandering, it actually is revealing the weakness. It means that the people who currently have the power know that they're weak. In South Africa, they used to say it like this: only a dying mule kicks the hardest. Notice the Texas delegation, they broke quorum, and I was talking to two of them the other day, Jones and Talarico, and they came back to try to protect, they said, a super majority from changing even more rules. And Newsom in California is saying that we need to match fire with fire. But yes, but if they have 30-some states and you have 20-some states, matching fire with fire is not enough of a response. Not enough. And just being mean, cheating doesn't match. Matching cheating with cheating is not ultimately going. There's a lot of stuff got to go before that. I'm from North Carolina. The first people we had to deal with when it came to redistricting the wrong way were Democrats. Long before Republicans ever had the offices, we had to fight Democrats in the South, all right? Because they wanted blacks enough to get elected, but not enough to really change the political calculation. So Democrats got to admit that. Secondly, Democrats have to admit that we could have reinstalled the Voting Rights Act since June 25th, 2013. But even when Democrats had power, both houses and the White House, they didn't do it. Now, you can't just blame Trump and ignore what you didn't do. Just like living wages. Living wages. Democrats had the opportunity when Biden and Harris were together to pass living wages. 8 Democratic senators joined the rest of the Republicans and voted it down. Kamala Harris would have had to give the deciding vote. Imagine if she was running for office and she was able to say, I gave the deciding vote to give 40-some million people a living wage. See, we can't forget how we got here. I'm not saying it's the blame of all Democrats, but you gotta own, because if you're gonna use power, you better use it. That's the point. We have to use power and not promise and get in office and then fall back. During COVID, we had passed COVID relief and passed the Voting Rights Act, both at the same time. We'd been in a very, very different place. There's a study that just came out from Celinda Lake that said 19 million people that voted for Biden and Harris did not vote again in this past election. Just didn't vote. They didn't vote for Trump, they just didn't vote. So they studied them. They went out and did a study. You know what they found out? The majority of them did not vote because they did not hear a clear economic message and policy from Democrats on how they were going to address the poor and low wages. They heard middle class, middle class, middle class, middle class. And so even in Newsom does what he does. The other state does that, but something more has to happen. Right now in these states, and I'm through for the conversation. Did you know that in, say, Mississippi, there's 798,000 low-income voters. Only 400,000 of them voted. That means only 50%, which means the number of low-income voters that didn't vote outdistanced the margin that Trump won by. And in 2018, the margin that the governor won by was only 23,000 votes, and over 500,000 poor and low-wage voters alone did not vote. In Texas, there's 1.3 million poor and low-wage income voters. Low-income turnout, 4.3 million. The low-income turnout is 1.8 million. That means 57% of poor and low-income voters in Texas didn't vote. That's 2.4 million. Trump only won by 1.5. So it's not just having redistricting battles. We need the most massive voter turnout ever that will change at-large elections and will change some of the districts, and they will come back saying we did redumbing, not redistricting, because nobody knows yet what will happen if 65 or 70% of Americans that can vote turn out to vote. What we do know is the number one reason poor and low-wage voters don't vote is they say nobody talks to us. Nobody can, and you're not going to win by just saying I'm against Trump. We clear. We want to know in the first 50 days, are you for women? And will you vote according? Are you for living wages? Are you for universal health care? Are you for fully funding public education? What will you do with your first 50 days? Since you're bothered by what they did with their first 100 days, what will you do? Are you for immigrants? What will you do? That's going to be what it takes to move people. And then we also have to confront MAGA in ways that are clear. You can't just keep talking about the cult figure. You got to show who upholds the cult figure. That's why now all over the South, we're taking caskets to senators' offices on Monday. We impacted people carrying them and clergy in full vestment. Because you voted for it, you're going to own it. We're not going to let it go out of the headlines. In a few weeks, in California, with Save America movement, we're going to release Liberty vans. In those Liberty vans, we're going to have an immigrant, a pastor, a veteran, and a driver that can really drive. And we're going to have a camera crew professionally, and we're going to follow ICE and expose exactly what they're doing in real time. You cannot defeat authoritarianism and fascism by being scared. You got to put them on blast. You got to show the whole world. And you have to run everywhere. You got to be a power everywhere. You can't keep talking about, well, these are battleground states, and that's consultants who want to get a lot of money paid to do a little work. You got to find some consultants that will fight everywhere, every time, every election. Down to the last, what did they say in Red Tail? Down to the last vote, down to the last ballot, down to the last person. Everywhere must become a battleground state. Everywhere. And we know that we have won before. In this country, when it looked like Jim Crow would win, folk came together. Like William Lord Garrison, a white man who joined with Frederick Douglass. And William Lord Garrison said, go tell somebody to be moderate who's watching their child burn up in their house, but don't ever tell me to be moderate when it comes to challenging the evil of slavery. We know that people came together, whether it was Ann Brayton in Kentucky or the Quakers here in Ohio or others. It was from Ohio at Miami University. Talk to me, somebody, that young folks were trained and went down to the South for Freedom Summer and risked their lives. And it would be sad for them to have more courage than we have now. It would be sad. It would be sad for them to do more with less, and we do less with more. They didn't have TikTok. They didn't have Instagram. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't have any of those things, but they had courage. They had a commitment to the fundamental ideas of right. And they went Jewish and black and Christian and Muslim. And so finally, how do we deal with this? It's right in the Bible. I'll stop here and take some questions. As they say, I got some more. I'm going to leave the more to talk to this. How do you deal with it? Long time ago, Amos chapter 5, that were idolatrous, authoritarian, fascist-type leadership and authority. And God spoke to Amos. Now, we often quote the last part, let justice roll down like water. But if you do that, you get the hoop without the substance. You miss the methodology that he laid out. Listen what he really said. He said, it's time, and I'm doing it in the Message Bible, for somebody to speak the truth. And raw truth is never popular. But here it is, bluntly spoken. Because you run roughshod over the poor, and you take bread right out of their mouths, you as a nation are never going to move into the luxury homes that you have built. You're never going to drink the wine from the expensive vineyards you have planted. I know precisely the extent of your violations. I know the enormity of your sins. It is appalling as a nation, and somebody must tell the truth. You bully right living people. You take bribes right and left. This is in the Bible. You kick the poor when they're down. Justice seems like a lost cause, and evil is epidemic, and decent people are throwing up their hands, and protest and rebuke are useless and a waste of breath, some are saying. But I come to say that God said, don't give up yet. Seek good and not evil, and live what you talk. You talk about the God of the angel army being your best friend. Well, live like it and act like it, and maybe it will happen. I want you to hate evil and love good, but I need you to work it out in the public square. You got to come out of the sanctuary, and you got to work it out in the public square. And if you work it out in the public square, maybe God will help you. And maybe I will notice a remnant. I don't need everybody, but if I can get a remnant. Pastor, I'm trying to go to my seat. But if I can get a remnant, if I can get a remnant in Ohio, if I can get a remnant in North Carolina, if I can get a remnant in the South, if I can get a remnant in the Midwest, God says I need a remnant that'll go out into the streets. This is verse 16, and cry loudly and act like something is wrong. Stop acting like it's okay. Cry. Fill the malls with tears. Fill the shops with tears. Cry doom. Cry, weep loudly. And then say, not me, not us, not on our watch. Empty the offices. Empty the stores. Empty the factories. Empty the workplaces. Everybody engage in some form of nonviolent action. Get everybody to cry and say, this is wrong. And God says, I want to hear it. And when I hear you acting like you don't want your nation to be like this, then I'll come and visit you. Then I'll come and help you. Then I'll help you. Then I'll help you. And when I help you, justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. It's time for a meeting in the public square. Every street, every ballot box, every street corner, every church, every place of power. Are you ready? Are you ready for a meeting? Are you ready for a movement? I want God to visit this nation like never before. And God says, if we'll act like we need God's help and something is wrong, God will visit us. God will visit us. God will visit us. God's done it before, and God will do it again. Oh, hallelujah.
Friends, When the moment calls to stay and listen, the moment calls to stay and listen. Thank you so much for being here with us, to Reverend Barber for being here. And I do want to also recognize Pastor Larry.
I want to take a question.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
don't want.
Pastor Larry, I know you've been here. Maybe do a quick question while we get the Q&A ready to roll. Is everyone here okay staying a little bit longer? Is everyone
Sure.
okay with that?
Sure they are.
Thank you. I thought I had a feeling. For our live stream audience, we're here with Bishop William Barber II and moderating the conversation. And here with us also is Reverend Larry Macon Jr. with Mount Zion Oakwood Village. We are at the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Cynthia Connolly, Director of Programming. For our live stream audience, if you would like to engage in the conversation, you can text us at 330-541-5794. Again, that's 330-541-5794. And our City Club staff will try our best to work it into the program. I'm going to turn over to Pastor Larry while we get the Q&A set up. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand, and our staff will try and get to you as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we put our hands together one more time for
SEIU.
Reverend Barber? Of course, we have many people that are going to have questions here today, and that is my job to open it up to the floor. But again, we welcome you to the city of Cleveland. We welcome you because we know you've been traveling all across the country and all across the nation. So we're wondering today, Reverend, where do you find the hope in America? And I think there's people here that need the hope, and there's people here that believe, as we as preachers of the gospel and ministers of the gospel, we preach the gospel of hope, and we believe that God has a plan, but we also want to know, where do you find where the hope lies in all of this that you have spoken today?
Well, first of all, thank you. And I'm glad we're having this time for conversation. And I would say to my sister, the room has shifted. So people are ready for a meeting. And it's amazing when you know when the folk have heard. And that this need for us to have what I call this moral fusion, which is moral analysis, moral articulation, moral agenda building, and moral action. Where do we find the hope? Well, you have to start with the despair. Because hope is not optimism. And so if somebody asks me, are you optimistic? Am I hopeful? Not only am I, I'm commanded to be and empowered to be. But hope that doesn't go through a cross, I don't trust it. Hope that doesn't go through a Red Sea, I don't trust it. So when we came out of COVID, you would think coming out of COVID where 60% of the folk that died, one study says at least 350-something thousand people died not because of COVID, but because of lack of health care. In the country that spends more on health care than anybody else. And then we passed a little health care, and you say, okay, we actually figured out how to end poverty. We passed poverty, and poverty dropped. Child poverty dropped 50%. But it was a temporary pass, and as soon as we saw a little bit of daylight, we pulled it back. That will cause despair when you give people a glimmer. Y'all ever seen that movie, Perfect Storm? Yes. And at the end, they're about to come out, and then he says, she's not gonna let us out. And that's how a lot of people feel. She's not gonna let us out. I mean, how do you go from COVID and people dying and refrigerator trucks in your city to MAGA? I mean, how do you do that? So you got to deal with the despair. The despair that was, the COVID didn't bring it, it exposed it. It exposed the weakness of our health system. It exposed the poverty. It exposed how susceptible we were to dictators and authoritarianism that will promise they love you, but it's only for their greedy friends. And then we find out we give, we're more interested in giving tax breaks to the greedy rather than keeping the poor out of caskets. And we also saw that some people were more interested during COVID in putting people on the Supreme Court than keeping people out of caskets. So that's a lot of heavy stuff down, on top of heavy stuff. So you say, well, where do you find hope? Well, first of all, hope comes for me and many in the fight back, not outside of the fight back. I think it was Jürgen Moltmann that said, faith becomes hope when the faithful decide that which is happening is, I'm paraphrasing, is so wrong that they can no longer accept it as it is. And when they can no longer accept it as it is and engages it, that's hope. That's hope. Hope is when hope comes for me when I go to West Virginia and I find a group of women in West Virginia who on Tuesdays sell tacos. They did this during COVID, and they asked them why. And they said, because we do this to build a community fund so that when women who can't afford things during their monthly cycles, who are only making $2.13 an hour as waiters, which, we form this fund to help them. But we also help people like ourselves build political power. And now those white women in West Virginia are hooked up with black women in Alabama. That's hope. Hope for is a room like this where I sense this. I'm going all over the country. Hope is we asked 20 people to show up in Mississippi, and 100 some plus show up to take these caskets to St. Louis. Hope is when we walked into the rotunda on a few weeks ago, myself, another person, and a Franciscan, a former Christian nationalist trained by Strom Thurmond that has changed. That's hope. Who actually is my co-editor and like a brother to me, Jonathan Hartgrove. And a woman with cerebral palsy, and others who go into the rotunda to pray. And they arrest us for praying. And I said, they just messed around and built some more hope because 6 million people saw that, but more people said, wait a minute, if they went in, I'm coming. Because people get released from their courage by the courageous actions of others. And lastly, hope comes from knowing history. I'll give you two more quick pieces. In the 1850s, the Supreme Court passed a rule, the Dred Scott decision, and they said the black man has no rights, the white man has to abide by. And Frederick Douglass actually went into despair after the election, along with the abolition movement, and they said, this is over. And then he was in Philadelphia, and he had his head in his hands, and it was Sojourner Truth saw him, and she screamed something at him. She said, Frederick, is God dead? And Frederick said it shook him. And he contacted the abolition movement and said, I got to do a sermon. I want 30 days. And he did this sermon, and he says, everybody's against us. The magistrates, the Supreme Court, and it's a terrible reality. But I now accept this as with a cheerful spirit. Because while we cannot appeal to the Supreme Court of men, we can always appeal to the Supreme Court of God. There's some things that Justice Taney can't do. And then he says, could this be a necessary link in the chain of events toward the downfall of the entire system of slavery? Therefore, what has just happened should not cause us to run, but it should embolden and intensify our agitation. And it was from there that he got stronger, and the movement got stronger after one of his greater defeats. Finally, I try to tell this sometime without tearing up. My wife and I battle immune deficiencies. And during COVID, my doctor was very clear with me when it first came out that if I caught it, I'd probably die, particularly before the vaccines. And that didn't have nothing to do with him not believing in God. It was just the reality of what immune deficiencies can do. And sometime later, I made it through. I got vaccinated, but it got to me real bad one day because I had worked with a family that lost 12 members of their family. And then one of the young ladies in our movement in Mississippi lost 25 members of her family in a 30-day radius because Mississippi didn't expand health care. And then one of the early founders of the Poor People's Campaign called me from the hospital And she said, her breathing was labored, and she said, Bishop, I'm not going to make it. She said, but promise me that you all won't stop. Promise me that you won't stop. And she prayed for me. And she died 2 days later. And I got really bad depressed. And so I just got into this, why? Why am I here? I mean, I'm not better than these people. I'm no better than them. That's just, And one day, way over in the night, almost like a kind of a Howard Thurman kind of thing, the Spirit said, you're asking the wrong question. Because you'll never be able to ask that question, even outside of COVID. Why are you still here? You can't answer that question. Ain't a person in this room can answer that question. Because you don't even know all that you face, dangers seen and unseen. You really don't know. You won't know that until you see the replay of your life in the divine realm of glory. But you can answer this question. Since all of us right now got 6 minutes of breath, that's all. Any good personal doctor will tell you if you stop breathing for 6 minutes, if you're here, you're not going to be here for most part. And there's some special cases. So the real question is not, why are you still here? What are you going to do with your 6 minutes? And that's when hope is born. When you realize that your 6 minutes are not accidental, that your 6 minutes are treasured, your 6 minutes are important, your 6 minutes are too valuable to be used wasting breath lying, wasting breath hurting people, wasting breath being unjust. That instead, whether I got 6 minutes, 6 hours, 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, or 60 years, I'm going to use the breath that I have the rest of my life for hope and justice and truth. And hope comes up out of that mountain of despair.
Thank you. Give the Reverend a great big hand clap one more time for that. Reverend, first of all, I want to mention to you that we're thankful that you are surviving and that you survived. And we believe it's of God that you're here today. And so we knew that you were here for such a time as this.
Thank you, sir.
In my church, we would say amen.
Oh, hallelujah.
But today I'd like to open the floor to those who are our guests here today. So we have a guest right here who's going to give her first question.
First of all, thank you so much for being here, Reverend Barber. The president has made it very clear that he hates African Americans. Well, he hates anybody who's not white and straight. But my question is, what do you say to people who vote for someone who they know hates them?
Well, I think his hate is broader than that. He just arrested Bolton this morning. I think a neo-fascist and authoritarian, you can never reduce their hate to race. Racism may be one thing. He more hates people that don't feed his narcissism. I don't know where all of this hatred comes from. I don't know what demons have control of his life that makes him. I mean, not only him, but what makes any politician get up in the morning and say, I know what I can do with power. Let's hurt somebody. I mean, if you look at it from that standpoint, it's a lot of sick people out here. I mean, and I don't think their mother, when they had them, put Trump or anybody in her arms and said, my prayer for you is that you will take as many people's health care as you can. My prayer for you, is that you will take all the money from poor folk and give it to wealthy folk. By the way, more money transferred from poor and low-wage workers than was transferred from the slaves to the slave master. So I think we have to expand. Then the second thing is, I'm glad my sister asked that question. So what do you do, as you say, not only for, and by the way, he got less votes this time. The numbers say he got less votes this time. And that's why this past election, we really got to do some analysis, because it's not so much what he did, it's what people didn't do. He got less votes. Where did all those, he got, 15% of black men? 70-some million people voted for him. 90-some million people didn't. Some black women voted for him, women voted for him, some Latino men voted for him. In fact, a lot of folk voted. What we got to do is get underneath what, unless we're going to just say they're all foolish, and I don't believe that, but what is it that they weren't hearing or that they did hear? And one day, I think we got a picture of it. He was in outside of Maryland, and somebody asked him a question about the economy, about groceries and stuff. And he said, "You know I love you. Y'all know I love you." And someone went and did some research and found out Hitler used to say that same stuff. That neo-fascists and authoritarianism have a way of going among people who are already hurting, who already feel abandoned. And a whole lot of places Trump has been able to go is because of where we have abandoned. And if progressives or whatever you want to call yourself, Democrats don't own that, this country will always be susceptible to this kind of authoritarianism. If you don't own the places we have not gone and talked to people, case in point, we went to East Kentucky back in 2018. Beshear was running, and he became governor, right? I think it's Beshear. Yeah. What's his name? Beshear? Yeah. That's what I thought. And so when pastor went out there, somebody called me and said, "You don't want to go out there, they're gonna kill you." I said, "What do you mean they're gonna kill me?" "That's East Kentucky." I said, "I know where it is. That's MAGA country." I said, "No, it's not. That's Ann Braden country." They said, "Who is Ann Braden?" I said, "The white lady who was a contemporary of Rosa Parks, who stood as strong against racism as any black person." They said, "Huh?" I said, "Yeah, that's not Trump country." I said, "That's the country where a white woman, when the mob boss, when the coal miner executive and the sheriff came looking for her husband because her husband was involved in union building, started singing to them, 'Which side are you on?' The same song that Black Lives Matter lifted up, but a lot of people didn't know that song was born by a white woman in East Kentucky." We went out to East Kentucky where there were children that had been thrown out of their churches because they're gay, who were living in the woods and had thrown out by church pastors who were gay and chauvinistic, who didn't want women in positions, who didn't like gay people. And yet those children had found camaraderie in church. We went out there and we met with black and white coal miners who were upset because Mitch McConnell had basically sold off their pensions and their coal miners to these foreign national countries. And long story short is, we went out there to talk about how people were bamboozling them. 4 of those 6 counties voted for Beshear, even though they were called by the consultants, as Mayor Pete told me, in an open forum on TV. I asked him the question, "Why is it that you can't get even Democrats to say poor and low wages?" And he said, "I'm probably gonna get in trouble for this, but our consultants tell us not to." I said, "What?" He said, "They advise us not to." I said, "How do you advise people running for office to ignore 41% of a nation?" And now in so-called battleground state, poor and low wage people make up almost 40% of the electorate. How do you do that? So these people, and they told us the reason they voted for Beshear. They said when Lyndon Baines Johnson was alive, he came to Harlan County, Kentucky, which is right near Hazard. The Dukes of Hazard is all that. And he said he went to Harlan County and he announced the war on poverty. Since then, these folks said Dems had abandoned them. But the Trump-like folk go there. So some of them vote for who comes out there. When Beshear went out there and started talking about some things are not left versus right, but right versus wrong, and says, when you elect me, he didn't just say elect me because I'm against this guy. He said, elect me, and the first actions I'm going to take is I'm going to restore health care. Because the Republican incumbent had taken away the Affordable Care. I'm going to pass felony reenfranchisement. Because black and white poor folk in Kentucky were caught up in being disenfranchised. He said, and I'm going to fight for living wages. 4 of those 6 counties flipped, and he won Kentucky in an off-year election against an incumbent. We're going to have to, I think that for me is, whatever the reason is, Trump, we've got to unpack this. And then lastly, you don't deal with authoritarianism by constantly focus on the authoritarian or the fastest cult leader. The writer of this book I was telling you about says, you have to get down to the people who are supporting. He couldn't do it if the Senate didn't pass it. He couldn't do it if, is that me? And you have to get down to that group, right, and make them feel the pain as well. Because the goal of neo-fascism and authoritarianism is to make you focus all your conversation, all your attention on that figure. When that figure, if he doesn't have a Senate and a House, is a figurehead, right? And all he has is executive orders, which are not law, because they can be undone. Bannon, there's a video out you all ought to see. Bannon actually said this. Bannon said in a video, paraphrasing, we told Trump, do all the executive orders he wants to. Anything he want to do, just do it. And keep the folk distracted. Because this is what we're going to be doing while he's doing that. We're going to get a control of the $5 trillion budget so we can control the $76 trillion of assets. We're going to get control of the Justice Department so we can use it for our reasons. We're going to cut public education. We're going to go after these so-called liberal institutions. We're going to focus on making immigrants the boogeyman, particularly Latino immigrants. And we're going to work to put in place more and more voter suppression. There's a video out there. He laid it out, and he said we're going to return America to the golden age. But what we need the president to do is to pass all these write all these executive laws and keep folk distracted. So I don't know who can answer that question, why people vote for somebody who hates them or why he hates so much. But what I do know is what we have to do is organize the pain. If 17 million folk get knocked off of health care, we ought to be organizing that pain and mobilizing it to the polls. If 21 million people get kicked off of health care, we ought to be organizing that pain. In other words, again, the Bible is clear. Our political strategy ought to simply be Psalm 118. The stone that the builders rejected must now become the chief cornerstone in the transformation, rebirthing of American politics. If we don't reach the stones that have been rejected, we're just going to have circular movement. If we do, we may very well not merely shock the heart of the nation, but transplant the heart of the nation and build a new political reality.
Put your hands together for our bishop.
Pastor Woods, Richard Woods, coming to tell you hello.
Thank you all for joining us at the City Club. Again, I'm Cynthia Connolly. I would like to thank our friends at Cuyahoga Arts and Culture and Cuyahoga County Public Library for their partnership on today's forum, as well as St. Luke's Foundation for the Health Equity Series, and also our thanks to Heather Holmes Dillard for her partnership as well. Friends, please have a great weekend. Enjoy the sunshine. Our forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
The ideas expressed in City Club forums are those of the speakers and not of the City Club of Cleveland, IdeaStream Public Media, or their sponsors. Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.